Hi again. Let's look through the evidence on the idea that religion is a force potentially for social change. So I asked you firstly to look at the work of Weber, and I'm fairly sure you're all familiar with that. So remember, Weber looked at a religious sect, the ascetic Protestant Calvinists, who believed they were God's chosen people. Remember, they had broken away from Catholicism, which they now saw as corrupt, and believed they had the secret to the afterlife. But they were a bit paranoid. And so they had to keep proving their devotion to God to make it to the afterlife. And they believed God wanted them to do two things. So firstly, to work really hard. And remember, they were farmers, so they were toiling in the fields all day long. Secondly, they believed in an ascetic lifestyle, that total self-denial, no fun at all, no alcohol, no fornication, no treats. They even ate standing up. Children slept on the floor. It was a brutal existence to please God. Let's hope it worked. So inadvertently, and that's the really important word here, inadvertently, by working hard on their farms and by not spending any of the money on themselves, they almost created the perfect capitalist business model. And so they became extremely successful agriculturalists and became extremely rich. That wasn't their aim, but inadvertently, they did become an extremely powerful capitalist force. Weber argues that this business model acted as a catalyst for the spread of Western capitalism, which is a big claim. Okay, how can we criticise that? I mean, firstly, Kautsky argued that there was Calvinism where there was no development of capitalism, and equally that capitalism was starting to develop where there was no hint of the aesthetic Protestant Calvinists. So the link is tenuous. Secondly, and Weber himself says this, and this is an important one, that if taken to its logical conclusion, the real relationship between religion and global social change is going to be that ultimately religion is wiped out by capitalism. He says, as global capitalism spreads, as we become ever more sophisticated with our science and our technology, ultimately we'll be able to answer all the questions. We'll have no need for the mystery and the hope provided by religion. So although he argues that the Calvinists acted as a catalyst, they sped up the spread of Western industrial capitalism, actually ultimately taken to its final conclusion, the spread of capitalism may herald secularization, the end of religion as we know it. Okay. Then I asked you to have a look at neo-Marxists. So Maduro, you wouldn't need to say much. Maduro looked particularly at Brazil and said that some of the Catholic priests there actually acted as a force for social change for their oppressed villagers and townspeople, that they in fact helped their congregations to escape the local oppression, and so acted as a force for social change. Billings, you remember, looked at the plight of textile workers and miners in America in the early 20th century. And they had very different outcomes. They both turned to their local church to almost support them in trying to get better work conditions, better pay, better hours, better health and safety. Now, in the case of the miners, the church wasn't terribly active and not a lot of change occurred. In the case of the textile workers, the church acted almost like a trade union. It wrote letters for the workers. It provided a place for them to meet. It had an educated leader to help them, and also provided motivational sermons. And actually they did get better work conditions, and religion arguably helped bring about social change. So two very different outcomes there. We also looked at the work of Bruce, who looked to America, and he looked at two religious movements that have attempted to mobilize religious change in America. The first one was Martin Luther King trying to bring about much better civil rights for the black population, for black Americans. And of course, he did have considerable success. Bruce believes that the reason he managed to mobilise the congregation was firstly because he used his links as a minister to encourage other people in Alabama to boycott the buses, which was his first protest. So literally word of mouth. But also, he then, when he became way more influential, almost took a Jesus-like stance, or encouraged a Jesus-like stance, which people related to. He encouraged people to take a peaceful attitude to creating social change. So he set up sit-ins, obviously massive rallies, but insisted that his followers were always peaceful, turn the other cheek, even if people were attacking them. I think because he acted as the moral majority, he managed to mobilise support not just amongst the black population of America, but also the middle-class white population, which put huge pressure on the American government to act. The other movement he looked at is the evangelical New Right Christians in America, who are avid supporters of the Republican Party in America. And there's particularly the Tea Party, which is quite an extremist movement within the Republican Party. So women like Sarah Palin have been very public supporters of this movement. What they are trying to do is bring social change in the form of returning to a more, what they'd consider pure and Christian way of life in America. Can I say I'm not agreeing with that? The changes they advocate by lobbying government, by getting involved in government, are banning gay marriage, or even being gay potentially, taking evolution out of school, bringing back creationism, limiting medical developments which might have used embryos as part of it. I mean, the list is endless. The reason I would think, I mean, they've had some success because actually 1 in 4 Americans subscribes to that viewpoint. And if you believe the statistics, 1 in 6 young ladies in America has taken the purity pledge, which is extraordinary. However, I think and certainly Bruce feels, that their influence has been limited by the fact that they take such a Christian traditional stance, which I think for a lot of Americans, particularly on the East and West Coast, is not in line with their liberal views of how people should live. So I hope you wrote something about all of them and that's been helpful. My next one is going to be looking at fundamentalism to cheer us all up, and looking at that from the point of view of its influence on social change. All right, see you later.